Okay, this is going to be a fun one. 17 things to leave behind in 2024. This is going to be a beast of a video, but I think it so needs to happen. Just for context, for those who don't know, my name is Maceo Owens. I go by the ERG Homegirl on LinkedIn just because I'm all things employee resource groups. I've been an ERG Leader, ERG Program Manager, and now it's been a little bit over a year that I've been full-time with the ERG movement, helping companies all over the world when it comes to their ERG programs, using frameworks that come from the business world, because again, I don't think that we have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to what does it look like to do effective communities within a business. Well, we can take a lot of this actually from business frameworks, go figure. So anyway, I love ERGs. I help companies all over, and just know I work with a lot of companies too. I speak to a lot of people. And honestly, with all the calls that I had last year, and I had many, I've come up with a set of trends that I've seen within the ERG space that it's time to put to rest. Okay, let's leave it in the last year. Let's leave it in 2024. This way we can start a little fresh with our new year, new us, new year, new ERG space. All right, so that being said, we're going to review the 17. I'm also from the beginning just going to crop this. So I'm just going to say the 17 really quickly, but this is not going to be in the full video. So 17 things to leave behind in 2024 with your ERG program. Thing 1, I also just want to say this is not in order at all. This is just me having a list here in front of me. So thing 1, resisting ERG structure. This one is really in particular to ERG leaders. A lot of ERG leaders are resistant to folks coming in and making their ERG programs better. Actually, I think I want to say that. Resisting structure. Now, this one's interesting. It's a mix between ERG leaders and ERG program managers. Sometimes I'll hear ERG program managers say, oh, well, we just kind of let them do their own thing. We don't want to tell them how to do their thing, essentially. And also for ERG leaders, the other piece is, well, we don't want someone coming in and taking over our ERG. Like, there's this weird narrative when it comes to ERGs right now that like structure is the enemy of grassroots, where really structure is the next level of grassroots. If you ever want to elevate your ERG program, a big component in that is actually adding some structure into it. And you can't cherry pick what that is when we say adding some structure into it. There is a clear framework that exists, again, beyond ERGs when it comes to structure that you need to have. That's why we talk often about the 3 Ps of ERGs. But this resistance is saying that structure is the enemy, a thing of the past. Understand structure is the next level. And right now, the space is demanding a next level from ERGs. The space is demanding that ERGs step it up right now. Now's the time. Otherwise, your program might not exist anymore. Not having structure, being just kind of like this lax, free-flowing program that has its own budget and is taking up the time of employees, no longer the move. Sorry, it's just not cutting it anymore. Now, I say that part really as a thing for ERG program managers. Really, let me restart. Now I say that part. Now, number 1 was really in reference to ERG leaders. Honestly, when we're talking about resistance to structures, I think ERG program managers kind of know why structure is needed. But the trend number 2 that we have to leave behind is just being super lax as an ERG program manager. Again, that person who says, well, we just let them do their own thing. Like, we're not really hands-on with the program. Let's leave that behind, okay? At the end of the day, this is a formal program. And if you're not taking it seriously, how do you expect the business to take it seriously? And also part of lax, I'm like doubling down, like adding like and scared ERG program managers too. Look, I get it. It's uncomfortable to come in and kind of, I don't want to say take over someone else's baby, but oftentimes that's what it feels like to an ERG leader. Now, they will trust your direction if you have that confidence in saying, hey, by doing this, you're going to get a better result. I know that you want to make people from your community feel seen. I am making it easier for you to do that. I'm making it easy for this program to exist long beyond you're here. Like, there are so many perks to following this structure. You as an ERG program manager have to be the person who says, this is the change we're making. This is why. It's actually not a question of if it's being made. But I do want your buy-in along this process. Like, that's what it has to come down to at the end of the day. So this, again, I think again, at one point in the space, it didn't demand such a aggression towards action and clarity and structure. I think that at one point, yeah, it was cool, or you could be a little bit laid back, a little bit hands off, or maybe even not have a real point of contact for the program. Those days are gone. So the process of being just like that chill ERG program manager, a thing of the past. Item number 3, actually not training your ERG point of contact, DRI, directly responsible individual. Whoever is over the ERG program, I don't care what you call them, but that person needs some training. I'm just going to be clear here. Now, here's the gag. Like, here's the unfortunate thing is that training right now, there's not a single one out there that I would recommend, because I feel like, at least, if nothing else, right, to train an ERG program manager, you have to have been an ERG program manager, and an ERG program manager of a successful ERG program, one that success is not relative. It's hitting metrics. It's making a shift towards goals. But again, I think that more than anything, like, metrics exist. So that means that if anybody out here is like training ERG program managers on how to be a better program manager when you've never been one, when you also did not use metrics to move the needle on an ERG program, I just don't know if I would listen to that person. Anyway, shade but no shade. At the same time, I just say very clearly, look, I see the gap. You all have been hitting me up, so I already know we need something for the ERG program managers. And I think that this was an aha moment for me, like maybe back in October. Really, I can speak to ERG leaders all I want, but at the end of the day, the person who owns the program really determines the direction of the program. And as an ERG program manager, back when I did that full time, I never had that training. I had to go searching for answers on my own. And at the end of the day, a lot of folks are just sharing a lot of bad information, or just regurgitating it, or just saying the first thing that comes to their minds. There's not a lot of great information out here. So ultimately, with the ERG movement, plug but no plug. Look, the part of ERG movement is also creating things that also better deliver this information. So if nothing else, when you're seeing this video, make sure to join our ERG Champs community if you are an ERG program manager. It's completely free, and I'm super excited that this month we've launched a ERG program manager space within this community. So exclusively for ERG program managers to come in and just to learn about how to be a better ERG program manager. Because again, a huge pain point that exists in the space, and something that I wish I had. More is coming on that as well. But long story short, I think that we have to acknowledge, I think with this point, I'm really trying to say more than anything else, we have to acknowledge that just because you're a DEI person does not make you equipped to run an ERG program. And also, even in a similar way, sometimes even just being an employee engagement person doesn't make you equipped to run an ERG program. Like, there's a certain set of skills, again, that are needed that right now don't exist. And that's like EQ and IQ type of skills, soft skills and hard skills. Like, there's so many things that like is not being talked about now. So I think it's just normalizing the fact that it's not inherent, right? One illustration that I used to give a lot, so I'll say it again, is just because you know how to make a cake, you might be the best cake maker. That does not mean that you're qualified to open a cake restaurant and run the business of the restaurant. And I think at the end of the day, this is the issue when it comes to a lot of program managers over ERGs. Like, we understand the concept of belonging or inclusion, but to actually make a program out of it where you're using company communities to really drive belonging, that's something completely different. Like, this is not just a training. This is not just you teaching about how to make a cake. The business, just like there's a business of a restaurant, like the business of leading an ERG community is a completely different skill set that is not inherent. And I think that there just needs to be a moment of recognition for that. Number 4. This one might feel a little bit random, but the elevation of chairs in particular. Like, when I say chairs, I'm not talking about ERG leaders at large. I'm saying sometimes within an ERG structure, it might be 2 chairs and maybe some pillars. We're not talking about pillars at this moment. But let's say hypothetically, there was an ERG that had 3 chairs, a communications lead, an events lead, and an admin. That, by the way, is not the structure that I would recommend at all, but sometimes I do see it, and maybe some chapter leads. Anyway, sometimes I will see it where those 3 chairs of the ERG will get much more than the rest of folks. Even if we're using the ideal governance structure, a chair, a communications lead, 2 events lead, 1 activities lead, chef's kiss. Even if we were to do that, sometimes I will see it so that the chair gets maybe a higher ERG bonus if you are compensating your ERG leads than the rest of the leaders. Maybe the chair alone gets to go to like an ERG summit in person. Honestly, I'm just so not a fan of that. And it is so interesting how we are recreating kind of what we're trying to solve for in some degree, especially because oftentimes those chairs have to be like at a certain level of the organization to qualify as a chair. I'm just so not a fan of that framework. And this is coming from me who was a support agent who became a chair. Even then, it would still feel so icky for me to be like, hey, I'm over this group. But the people who are actually doing the work, because keep in mind, chairs, not going too much in detail, but there's so little like direction on what chairs are supposed to be doing. Oftentimes chairs end up doing everything or nothing at all. Anyway, so with that, let's just imagine it's the nothing at all type of chair, which most chairs, unfortunately, that's just kind of what it leads to, because there's no clear direction, no clear input or outcome that they are here to drive. So ultimately, why are they being compensated the most for that work? Like, they're essentially getting all the credit for the work that their actual team did. Like, that doesn't feel wrong to you? I personally am a fan of like even reframing chairs. I feel like chairs is just one of those pieces of outdated language that we use just because it existed doesn't necessarily make it something that we need to still use today. So instead of chair, what I'm anchoring this on more, what I'm using more recently is project manager, the project manager of the ERG. And also when I talk to folks now, I say, as the project manager, hey, you are like the glue that brings the team together. You help to make sure that things are getting done, but also you help to identify, hey, what things aren't getting done and why. So potentially you can bubble that up to the person who's over the ERG program, maybe to make more structure, to make it easier for folks, maybe to ask some questions for clarity. That's what the chair, aka, like I said, now I call it a project manager, is really there to own. But elevating them so they get all these special perks and things, it just feels so icky to me again. And then you're making it so that the people who actually oftentimes do the most work get less. It just is like recreating systems that I thought we were here to kind of push back on. Like, I get the manager gets more money than the worker, but I mean, this is a volunteer program. And again, oftentimes where a lot of these volunteer programs don't have clarity on what folks are supposed to be doing. So at the end of the day, if chair is just a title, then why are they getting more? Anyway, not a fan of that one at all. Next up, number 5, entitlement, ego. We're going to make these 2 separate ones. Let's first talk about the entitlement. From the ERG leader standpoint, I think that ERGs were kind of spoiled between 2020 and 2022-ish. I think we started to slowly come out of it and like have a wake-up call in 2023. But those 2 years were like, I'm not going to call it bliss, but bliss in the manner of you probably got a lot of budget during those times, even without clarity or without frameworks on how to spend it. So it was almost like, hey, we're trying to invest in our communities, underrepresented communities, so we're going to give them these things. And then all of a sudden, the companies later realize like, oh, whoa, we need to put some structure behind these things. Otherwise, people are just going to expect it naturally, right? But when you expect something to happen, that's part of the entitlement. Actually, I just want to, just for fun's sake here, look up, what does entitled mean? Believing oneself to be inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. There's like so many words here. So inherently, meaning in a permanent way. I like that. I really like this definition. So believing oneself to be permanently deserving, so worthy of being treated in a certain way, specifically a way with certain privileges or special treatment. So if you believe that your ERG should forever, based on how you were treated in one case, forever have that same maintained level of support, whether it's financially or whatever it might be, then that would mean that you're feeling that you're entitled to that thing. Sorry, just have to break the news there. Now, with that, I'm here to tell you that's not the case, especially with a corporate function. Sorry to say, this might sound a little bit harsh, but you're not even really entitled to your role. Let's be honest. So many layoffs have happened. There's no such thing as entitlement within the corporate world. So, like, there's teams who aren't entitled to the same budget that they got last year. Like, this is just a reality of working in corporate. So no, as an ERG leader, you're not entitled to anything, but especially to say like how you were treated when the circumstances were perfect, when it just lined up perfectly with your interests and feeling like you should forever maintain that same level, not realistic. And I'm just here to tell you that very, very frankly. So yes, your budget might have gotten scaled back, especially if you used it inappropriately during that time. Inappropriate is not just on bad things, but it's, are you wasting your money? Are you not using your money? Are you using it on things that are just like blowing it all on swag and not really doing things that were tied back to data, which oftentimes you didn't have anyway? So yes, your budget was being misused, because at the end of the day, budget should be tied to member engagement, or let's just say even broadly impact of the ERG, but you didn't do that. You just spent it to spend it. So long story short, you're not entitled to next year's budget. Another piece of entitlement could be you might feel entitled to engagement. Why aren't people getting involved with the stuff? Like, we're planning stuff for them. Why aren't they getting involved? You are also not permanently deserving of your members' attention. You have to earn that with every piece of programming that you do. That means that you can't just throw together some panel. You can't just bring in some speaker and inherently expect a permanent level of support from your members. You have to earn it by having quality programming, quality events, quality activities, and quality communications. You're not entitled to a strong community just because you have an ERG that you're pouring a lot of time into. You still have to prove that this is a space that's worth members' time. So, a little spicy, but entitlement does exist right now. Thinking even more so, hey, this is my ERG, so what I say goes. This is not your ERG. I'm sorry. Just as a fact, this is a company program. Even if you started the ERG the moment that you took budget from the company, it's the company program. So you really don't have, the best thing that you can do is make the best out of the situation of just being a figurehead for this company program. And there's so many ways to make the best out of it. So when I say that you have to make the best out of it, I'm not saying it in a way where I'm saying this is a sucky situation. It actually is not that bad. But I am saying it is going to be that bad if you're like, well, I feel like all this power that I had is being taken from me. Let's be clear, you don't have any power, because it's a community. It's a corporate community that you are here to champion. So at the end of the day, whatever the corporate says goes. All right, on to the next. Ego. Ego is another one. Ego is similar to entitlement, but I think that ego more commonly, what I've seen, is actually coming more so from the ERG program managers. We're flip-flopping all throughout this set of trends. But from the ERG program managers, I would say ego, because a lot of you know the things that you're doing does not make any sense. Like, you know that employees are the ROI of your employee resource group. You know that the models that you're using are outdated. You know you don't have any data. And you know that the data that you do have, that you are measuring, you're not consistent with, and it's not even moving the needle on anything. You know that your ERG program could be better than it is, and you know that maybe even the decision that you made around your ERG program, let's just say like last year, you know that that was a bad decision, but you're not going back and changing it because you don't want to be looked at a certain way as an individual. It is disturbing to me that one individual can be the downfall of so many people even feeling that sense of belonging in the workplace. It's so disturbing to me that one individual saying, I don't want to look bad. I don't want to look like I'm changing my mind. So we're just going to continue down this path. It's really bothersome to me. Like, I talk to a lot of people and I have empathy for you. I get it. It's uncomfortable. And unfortunately, you were doing the most with the resources that were available at the time. So I do get it. But there are some people out here who are cool with letting the ERG program crash and burn for the sake of their own ego and not making the decisions that need to be made, not having the hard conversations with execs to kind of realign, hey, here's the new new approach and here's why we're doing it. And it's unfortunate to know that there will be millions, when you really think about it, like ERG membership wise, millions of people who will miss out, because of a few individuals. So I wish that trend definitely stays behind in 2024 and we just have the confidence to do what we need to do. Number 6, expecting your ERG leaders to build your ERG program. That is a trend that baffles me, if I'm being honest with you. You're expecting volunteers to go get the data for their ERGs. You're expecting volunteers to build governance, and you want them to build a playbook. And some volunteers, don't get me wrong, they will take on the challenge. They're like, hey, whatever, I'm here to help, so if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But it's your program, it's underneath you. So why are you expecting a volunteer to do that? Even then, bigger problem here, an ERG program is a program. It's not a set of these random groups here and there who all do their own things. You need one person to create uniformity for the program and how it should operate. Not ERG leaders, people who are part of this one entity of the program, creating something. This ERG leader creating a piece of something else. This ERG leader recreating what this ERG leader did. That's not what this is here. The laziness when it comes to ERG programs, and I'm not speaking to anyone directly, I'll just say, as an ERG homegirl, I'm going to keep it real, and it's just these are the frustrations that go through my mind. Whoever leads the program, whoever owns the program, you are responsible for fixing the program at the end of the day. That's on you. It's not on the volunteers. And I know the excuse some will give. Some will say, well, the volunteers will be so upset if we take that from them, which is going back to one of the points that we talked to earlier, the one around scared or lax program managers. I promise you, leaders are happy to offload the work. They are happy to offload the work. They're happy to say, hey, we're going to let you take the reins, but here's the case, only if they trust you. Their resistance is due to them not trusting your judgment based on your previous actions or lack thereof, or inactions. So what this comes down to is that you might have some work to do when it comes to trust building. Some things you could do to help that would be to get some data for your leads and really take on that process and centralize it and have it be useful data, not a bunch of random charts, not you just doing membership growth, putting some thought behind it. But don't worry, I gave you the things already, so I'm trying to help you out here. But essentially getting some data for them, setting some benchmarks across the program, putting your foot down. It's almost, anyway, we're not gonna go into the parenting thing. I'm not a parent, so I'm not gonna speak to good versus bad parenting, but I will say you need to put your foot down. It's a company program. You're really embarrassing yourself not doing what you need to do. It might not feel like that. You might be the fun person who doesn't have any problems with anybody. And not that I'm saying that you should have problems with people, but I'm saying at some point the parent has to be a parent. At some point, the ERG program manager, whoever's over the ERG, has to actually program manage, not offload it to ERGs. So I don't think I have this as a thing here, so count this as an added bonus, even down to the mission statement piece. Sometimes I hear, we're trying to create mission statements for our ERGs. This is a thought that I also had at one point, that every ERG needs a mission statement. But let's be real. We know why the communities are existing. Anyway, we're going to leave the mission statement part out. I just see it sometimes. I don't think that ERGs are responsible for the strategy of their ERG in the way that a lot of people are articulating strategy. I think that ERGs can come up with a plan of what they're doing this year. Anyway, we're not going to go down that. Just know it's not on the ERG leader to build an ERG program. It's on whoever owns the program. So even if you are well, who owns the program? Who owns the budget that the program is coming from? Because it's that person probably. So number 7, no data. We just actually mentioned this. A lot of ERG programs don't have data. All you all have is number of members, number of people who attend events, and sometimes some sort of satisfaction score. That's the data that so many people have, and it's just weak. It's weak data. I'm sorry. It's not it anymore. Instead, high level, things to measure. If you have a communications channel, understand what is your communications engagement score, your channel index. I have different variations of these depending on what platform that you use, but your communications channel is where your community is built. So if your channel engagement is low, then also it's a good chance that your ERG community is kind of weak right now because people aren't connecting, they're not engaging. So side thing there. So that's one thing. I think another one is really around your member engagement score. What's the percentage of your members who participate in programming at least once over the course of the year? Programming doesn't have to just be events. It can also be asynchronous activities. You have that data already. There is no excuse. Both of the things I just mentioned, you all have access to %. Some people might not have their channel analytics specifically on Slack. You might have to request it from IT. I've never had IT deny it, but maybe hypothetically. You can try it. I give you an email template anyway to make it easy to try. But nevertheless, you have those metrics already. So there's no excuse in 25 that your program should not have data. I mean, plug, not plug. We make it so easy. Next week, you can have a beautiful dashboard. Why would you not do that? Like, doesn't even have to be with me. Really doesn't even have to be with me, but why would you not have data? If you don't have data, you really don't care on the outcomes of your ERG. You don't care about ROI if you don't have the data that you have right now. Like, if you're not doing anything with the data that you already have, you really don't care about your program. Like, this is not a serious program if there's no data. Period. Period. There's no business that operates without data. I'm frustrated, as you can tell. It is just kind of baffling to me with the data conversation that I'm like, it's baffling to me. Data is not, by the way, the diversity scores and things like that, retention by various dimensions of diversity. That's a form of data, yes, but honestly, that is not the most important data that exists within your ERG program. Oftentimes, you might not have access to that as an ERG program manager. That's fine. There's a lot that you do have access to, and I promise you, you're not going to get closer to that data just by whining about it versus making the most of the data that you already have and then proving that you're able to make strategic decisions off of that current data to move the needle on that current data. That might then unlock getting some of those more sensitive pieces. But also going back to the point that we said before, this is not on your ERG leaders to get. ERG leaders, if you're watching this video, you can go get the data, sure, but it's going to be a lot harder because you don't have the same sway that an ERG program manager would. We got to apply some pressure on ERG program managers. Like, we need this stuff. There are metrics right now that exist within our ERG program that we are not leveraging at all. So how are we actually supposed to increase engagement and impact for the community that we care about when we're not even measuring the current engagement and impact for the community that we care about? You all as ERG leaders, your responsibility, go get the data. In terms of, let me rephrase that because I just said don't do that. Your responsibility, you might have some of those reports that the program manager would need to assemble that data. So for instance, if you do host events on your Zoom account, or if you do host events on your Google Meet account or whatever, then you likely are the person who has that report. So maybe assembling those reports that you can send over to your program manager to do something larger with, sure. But in general, this is for the person who's over the ERG program over the ERG program to take care of. Number 8, gotta take a swig for this one. This is root beer, by the way. I'm a root beer girly, and I gotta take a swig for this next one because I don't even think I'm gonna go too much in detail. But BRGs, like this whole concept of business resource groups, which I just talked to someone earlier today. I don't think that the issue that I have is the name BRG. Now, granted, I think that is like, I'm not a fan of the name, to be clear. Like, I don't see why change it. But whatever. Let's just say you're like, well, our executives like want it, or we want it so explicitly clear that this benefits the business. Whatever. I can get past that. The issue is the inherent principle with BRGs, like the thought that an elevated employee resource group is a business resource group. An elevated program that's designed to help employees feel a sense of belonging is those same employees giving back to the business and making the business more money, impacting the business's bottom line, is mind-blowing to me. I do not know where this concept came from. Like, I'm still actively doing research to be like, who's at the bottom of this? Because where did we get this wild concept that employees need to be consulting the business internally or externally? And that is true success for these programs. Like, whoever did that clearly just had no concept of the benefits of community. Like, community is so, let's just put community to the side. Whoever said such a thing clearly doesn't even understand the basics around employee engagement, learning and development, or people programs in general. I think that's like the broader thing. Like, ERGs are a people program. People programs are not expected to generate the business money. It is a cost center. No one is asking the employee engagement team to benefit the business's bottom line, although the benefit of the employee engagement team is also to engage employees the same way that the benefit of an employee resource group is to engage employees. No one is asking the learning and development team to make the business money. You would be like, what is, those don't have anything to do with each other. Like, we're here to like enhance what does it look like to be an employee of this company. This topic irritates me so much. It's like I really have to. It's just so wild. It's taken us extremely off track with the purpose of ERGs. It's taken us just like to implement these pillars into our program, which we'll talk about in a second, that actually make no sense. ERG leaders are confused. They hate it. They're burnt out. They're like, this is not what I signed up for. And that's going to be consistent. And so if you're going down the process of being a business resource group, then you might be one of those program managers. Maybe not. But you might be one of those program managers that I mentioned earlier that you got to know that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you have to, right? Especially if I'm saying like there can be a lot of legal things around employees consulting the business. Like, you're still charging through. I can't do anything about that, but let's hope that we leave that in 2024. That's my goal. That's my hope, at least. Number 9, kind of in line with that, outdated models in general. There's a lot of outdated ERG models that I think came about around 2020 that I wish never had. Like, I do wish that I was there in 2020. Like, that I was as passionate as I am now, that I understood ERGs. I wish I was there so that I could just, like, because at the time, no other information about ERGs existed. I was an ERG leader, ERG program manager at the time, looking for information. Information was not really out there around ERGs. Like, it was rough in the space. So I wish I could have steered people in the right direction. Nevertheless, I hope that we will also be able to identify and weed out things that do not benefit our ERG program purpose, that hopefully we define. I hope that we will be able to say, this set of pillars does not make any sense for this program. This program is about benefiting employees. It is a people program. So maybe we just revisit how we're looking at our employee resource group program. I think that if you have marketplace or commerce as a pillar, I would watch out. I would revisit that almost immediately. And I would say not everything that you read on the internet or even in a book is right, especially nowadays where it's so easy to write a book. Anyway, that's what I have to say on that. Number 10, this one's for the ERG leaders, and maybe even honestly for the ERG program managers too, because someone is allowing this to happen at the end of the day. So number 10 is surface level programming. I see it a lot. I'm more than over the supporting women in the workplace events. Like, I'm not going to one of those. Sorry, but not really at the same time. Really not sorry. It's very bland, surface level. I don't know what value I'm getting from this. Like, let's leave the surface level programming in 2020 and let's actually focus on doing things that actually bring value to our members in 2025. Ideally, our identifying members, but regardless, to our members in 2025. Let's identify what value means to our members and let's do hyper-specific programming that delivers hyper-specific results to various segments of our membership. Number 11, frequent expensive speakers, even sometimes expensive speakers in general. I get it, I speak too, but I mean, at least if you've been to one of my sessions, I try to keep it interactive. You're coming out with some tangible things. Trust me, I have paid for some speakers that I regret. I've done it. I was like this close to actually this year launching some sort of like Yelp for ERGs, just to like vet which speakers are good versus which ones are bad. Too much of a headache. Maybe in the future, not right now. But at the end of the day, the point is, not every speaker is good, and don't assume that just because you paid a lot of money, don't assume that just because it's this person who is a big name person, that it's actually going to drive any real tangible value to members. Because again, that's at the end of the day what ERGs are here to do. Speakers may not be your answer, long story short. But even then, like I said, I'm not dissing speakers in general, but I would say when it comes to frequently spending your money and your budget on speakers back to back, I'm telling y'all right now, members don't want that like they used to. Members are not as likely to tune into a virtual event in general as they used to. So you're going to have to get more innovative with your programming in general. Number 12, I think I'm losing count. Anyway, next one, ERG Softwares. I really cracked myself up putting this in here, but I think it just needs to be said. The economics behind ERG Softwares has just always baffled me. I understand, in part, why a company at one point thought that an ERG software was the answer. We have a problem of low engagement, and our ERG programs are all over the place. Maybe we just need a software. I think hypothetically, if 30 years in advance, I don't know, maybe I'm being dramatic. I think that if an ERG program manager, former ERG program manager of a successful ERG program, were to say, here are the structures and the systems that I had to be successful and to have this successful ERG program, and I have now found a way to automate that and to convert it into this system where it's very plug and play, sure, maybe. I would be hesitant still, but I would be intrigued at least. Unfortunately, also, I think other people saw an opportunity for ERGs. They understood the problem statement, at least in part, high level. ERGs have a problem. They're all over the place. Let's give them a structure or a software, which is software is not even a structure. Side note. But anyway, we're going to give them a structure to make it super easy for them. And I think a lot of people saw dollar signs in the ERG industry. Like even going back to that 2020 to 2022 era, like ERG leaders, yes, we were getting a lot of budget, but at the same time, folks said, wow, I'm noticing these ERGs are getting a lot of budget. Anyway, the long short on software, I think that we'll do a session later this year on softwares, but I would say I would be hesitant to adopt any ERG software in 2024, especially ERG software in particular, because it's so new. So that means that your program is now a beta tester for this newer software. A lot of these softwares are missing a lot of core features, really because they don't even understand what makes a good ERG program. All they know about what makes a good ERG program is their limited experience as an ERG leader and or their experience from talking to ERG leaders. But most people who have an ERG software have never actually run an ERG program. So another problem there. A lot of the folks that they've been talking to are people who are lost and confused and don't understand what the issue is and the fact. Anyway, another thing is just probably don't know what they're talking about, is a lot of them have even led some companies down the wrong path, encouraging practices that are not true to driving engagement just for their own numbers' sake, such as if an ERG software were to tell you to host your ERG on their software versus your communications channel. They do not care about your community because your community does not want an external platform 9 times out of 10. So anyway, that's one thing. I think another one is like the private versus public ERGs conversation, where I literally I was listening into a session where an ERG software was speaking, and they're like, hey, yeah, you can just always start a private space with just your folks. And someone literally stood up and was like, hey, actually, that's illegal. We just went through this whole legal thing about this, and don't do that thing that the ERG software just said. And the ERG software was just standing there like scramble mode. Anyway, so that's the thing too. Beyond that, here is the one exception. I'll say red, yellow, green light, right? Red light for me is ERG software in general. Yellow light is maybe a software that is not ERG specific, but is for broader, like a broader software that's really more so maybe paid for maybe by the employee engagement team. So I know that there's a lot of intranets right now that are incorporating some sort of ERG aspects. Now, a lot of those products also are just kind of capitalizing off the fact that, hey, ERGs have a problem. We're here to just have one little thing just to make it a little bit easier. We gave you a component, space, sure, whatever. Take it because it's probably going to be free. Like I said, for your ERG program, we like free, especially because ERG programs have limited budget. ERG programs have limited budget anyway, so why would we spend limited budget on a software that doesn't actually solve for our problems at their root? So okay, if your intranet piece, or maybe you have like a social give back software, or maybe an employee engagement software, again, that your team does not pay for at all. The ERG program is not paying for this at all because it has other features to it that are bigger than the ERG program. Take it, sure, probably take it. Take some elements of it. Even like I said, because a lot of the softwares at large who end up throwing in like an ERG component also haven't run a successful ERG program. Hey, it's something that I'm trying. I've tried to, you never know. It might work out where one of these softwares might take me a little bit seriously and be like, hey, actually we can have some really specific things to make ERG programs better, and that'll be a beautiful day for ERGs. But nevertheless, the movement is not there yet. Anyway, so they might not have the best analytics. They might have some, and if you have no analytics, then I guess some weak analytics is a hair better than none. So take it. I think the green light for me is making the most of the systems that you have already that are completely for free, especially if you don't have some sort of optional thing that you could just kind of leech off of. I don't know if that's the best word, but nevertheless, I would say there's oftentimes a lot that you can do with the things that you already have. You just may not know where to start. So that's why I kind of provide these frameworks to make it a lot easier for you to know where to start, because there is a lot of data that exists. There's a lot of structure that really the structure should come from your governance, not from some random software who can adapt to any governance and not actually give real best practices, because they haven't done it themselves. So anyway, I would say make the most of what you have. Let's leave paying for these obscure things that are not actually going to deliver us a real result, because they've never themselves delivered a real result. At most, what a lot of softwares are standardizing an event planning process, which the way that I structure ERGs, event planning and setup should take less than an hour anyway. So I don't know if we necessarily needed to pay like $15,000 to like do that, because all we really needed was like a really good playbook. I don't know if we necessarily needed to pay for an expensive software, go through procurement processes, train our ERG leaders on this software that might not even exist in 10 years, just to do that, when really all we needed to do from the jump was to have a clear like structure and playbook and just do a quick overview with our leads on how the system is. And I'm saying this from experience. Like, I'm not just saying this as an opinion. I'm saying I literally work with companies now anyway who have software. So if you don't have a software, I'm telling you now, if you don't have a software, I'm telling you now that there are a ton of companies right now who are trying to get rid of their software, because they're realizing like a couple years down the line, like, oh, this doesn't actually change the fact that we have real problems with our ERG program. And if we just solve those problems, like, it actually makes the software obsolete. So that's why I'm really trying to steer people away from that. I would much rather you invest in your ERG program than invest in a software that claims to help your ERG program, and oftentimes is really just it's like cementing in mess, if we're being honest. So I'm done with the software piece for today. More to come. Number 13, exclusive ERGs. I guess we're almost done, so I can say this. So when I say exclusive ERGs, there's two versions of this. One, there are ERGs that focus on the majority group of their ERG. How ironic. So if I'm a Black ERG, but I'm doing programming that's mainly for African Americans, because they're oftentimes the majority group within a Black ERG, although there's almost 100% people who are not just African Americans within your ERG, well, that's exclusive, even though anyone is welcome. In this case, the community that you are here to support, you're not supporting at large, you're supporting your dimension of the community. Even how this came up today with a company that I'm working with is, even when it comes to the beliefs that you might have as an individual, you might feel like inherently everyone within your community believes this way too. They all have the same political views on this topic just because they're part of your community. That's not necessarily true. So by you assuming that, by you doing programming that's skewed towards your life views and your dimensions of diversity, is actually very, very exclusive. And a leader has to sometimes put their personal beliefs aside for the health and for the goodness of the broader community. Exclusive also could mean actually having a ERG space where people are not allowed because of how they identify. Yes, I'm talking about ERGs that only allow people who identify, don't allow allies within the group. There are a ton of legal things that you are now opening your program up to. I get it. Sometimes we want to do it for the psychological safety. We want to just be able to have a safe space, whether that's because we wouldn't feel comfortable speaking frankly, whether that's because we don't want people to find out that we identify with this community, whatever it may be. We might have reasons, but this company sponsored program is not your safe space in that sense, but it still can be a safe space. Just because allies are in your space does not have to mean that it's an unsafe one. So a ton of resources I have around that. Actually, I have a video too that I will link somewhere for you all to be able to see, where it talks a little bit more about the realities of having allies within ERGs and how, again, it doesn't have to be the worst thing in the world. But being exclusive can be the worst thing. I would rather have allies in a space than have no space at all. Next one, ignoring the legal things around ERGs. There are a lot of legal things around ERGs that historically has been deemed low risk, if you will. Nowadays, low risk has become high risk, especially in the political climate around the world, not even just within the US. So I would say then, if any time there was a time for you to really double down on making sure that your ERG program is ironclad, it is now. Again, I would rather have to shift some things around just to make it fit within a legal framework than have my ERG program shut down because the company was sued, etc. A lot of backlash internally or even externally that could happen with our ERG programs. So putting that out there as well. Number 15, pandering to allies. Yes, we talked about the other side of this, having allies within your ERG space. Now is the other part there. Like, once allies are in there, it does not mean that you do all this ally programming, like ally focused programming. So even back to the supporting women in the workplace, oftentimes even that title to folks, they say, well, this is clearly talking to people who aren't women on how to better support women. Like, we have to stop with the allyship trainings within the ERGs, especially if you have a diversity team or even a learning and development team. Leave the trainings in that sense around how to be a better ally to them. Occasionally, like at most once a year, you could do something that's geared around being a better ally. But definitely don't make that the core of your ERG. This is not a space where your members should say, well, that's where they talk like about my community, but they don't really do things for my community. I definitely don't need another space where they're talking about Black people. Like, I want to be in a space like an immersed in Black culture, because that's the space where I'm going to feel that psychological safety. And then allies can learn via immersing themselves also in that culture. And now, because they're in a space where they are a little bit uncomfortable, there's so much to learn when you are immersed in something that is new and uncomfortable. So allow allies to learn like that. I like to say ally-friendly programming, not ally-focused programming. Okay? Allies are allowed to come, but doesn't have to be geared towards them with the programming. And probably shouldn't. Almost done here. 2 more. Actually, no, this is our last one because I realized I said entitlement twice. I must feel strongly about entitlement. So for the last one here, too much talk, not enough action. That's literally how I have it written down here. There are some ERGs and some ERG calls that I've been part of where ERG leaders will say things like, yeah, let's think about that. And like, that's the end of the sentence. Like, let's honestly, I think let's think about that is like a phrase in general that I want to leave in 2024. Instead of, yeah, let's think about that and have that be like your resolution point. Instead, say, well, let's outline the pros and cons and decide on it now. Like, let's come to a decision within the next 15 minutes. As an ERG leader, your time is valuable. You're a volunteer who doesn't have infinite amount of time to dedicate. So therefore, you want to make the best use of your time. And oftentimes this thought of like, hey, let's forever have this thought process of the things that we want to do and never actually act, very problematic. Instead, just make the decision. I say this all the time. Your ERG members are thankful that you're around at all. Even if they're not engaging, they still want something from your space. They're just not engaging because they're not getting that thing yet, probably. So that just means, and this is why I oftentimes say, it's important for you as an ERG leader to show up, period. Not to show up perfectly or try to make a perfect space for your ERG members. Just show up, period. So that means more decisions, less long planning processes. Just get to it. This is community. This is people. Like, this work is important, but almost any decision that you make as an ERG leader is not life or death. So just act. Like, shorten the time between idea and execution. That is what we're trying to do more of in 25. All right, that's your list. Hopefully this was helpful. Yeah, we have a lot to do within the ERG space, because it's one thing for me to just talk about the things I want to see less in 2025, but it's another thing to make it easier for you all to do best practices. And that's what the movement is about, giving you all the tools that you need to make for a sustainable ERG program. So with that being said, more to come. If this was helpful, make sure to check out this video, where you will get even more resources for you and how to take your program to the next level. Signing off.